So I think it's constantly sort of a changing game. One thing I do commonly see and do advise, especially in the beginning, is try to feed from one breast. And so then on one feed, you might feed on the left, and on the next feed, you'll feed from the right, so that both breasts are being emptied sort of in a equal fashion. And like we've said before, you might have one that's the super boob, and you feel like the baby gets a lot more from that side. And that's okay. You know, let's say your right is a great producer and you get a lot. And then when the left baby still seems hungry, you can bring the baby to the right. That's totally fine. Again, it's all about feeding the baby at the end of the day. One thing that I often do see happen is as babies get a little older, then women feel a little bit more confident with what they're doing. Babies understanding what they're doing as well. You both feel like you have your breastfeeding relationship down. You've been able to nurse in a couple of different positions. That's when moms really feel comfortable saying, you know, he or she still feels hungry after left breast. Then totally, you can offer them the second breast. I think in the beginning, just so moms don't get overwhelmed, sometimes it's a little easier to just start with one breast so that you're able to kind of regulate. Some of the signs that babies are hungry, and I know parents are gonna be like, but they do that all the time. So some of the signs are rooting, definitely sucking, smacking your lips. Now, rooting and sucking are reflexes. So you're right, your baby will, if you rub their cheek, turn likely towards them. That's a reflex. If you were to put a pacifier in their mouth or a nipple in their mouth, yes, they will suck. That is a reflex. But those are two things to be aware of, that if your baby's starting to wake up a little bit and rooting towards their hands, that's a sign that they're likely going to be hungry. Another sign, and this is a late sign, is usually crying. Because by the time they're crying, they're past hungry, they're hangry. And when you're hangry, it becomes really hard to focus on the meal that's in front of you. Another thing I tell moms is sometimes when the breast feels really full and engorged, it's very hard for babies to latch on too. So also go by signs of how your breasts feel too. Think about the breast like a balloon. And if the balloon was really taut, it would be really hard to basically put your mouth on a taut balloon. But if you kind of release the pressure and let's say hand expressed a little bit, it becomes a little softer and the baby can latch on easily. Just helps with that perfect storm. If your baby is hangry and you feel like your breasts are really full, you can try to eliminate that feeling of fullness by a little bit of hand expression. But those are some of the top few signs that you can tell that your baby is hungry. I often recommend watch the baby and not the clock. So in the hospital, again, you might be told, feed your baby 15 minutes every 2 to 3 hours. Well, sometimes babies need to feed almost every hour in the beginning, and that's okay, especially as your supply is becoming established. So let's talk about cluster feeding. First of all, it's really normal. Just like all parents like you can't be crying again. It is super normal. And again, it's most likely to happen in the evenings when possibly your husband's still not home from work and you're at your wit's end and you are really just overwhelmed. And so it's the worst feeling altogether. First of all, tell yourself, oh, it's okay. This happens. It's normal. Oftentimes it can kind of happen when a growth spurt is happening because again, baby might be feeling a little bit more hungry. It can also just be a sign of needing comfort, right? Non-nutritive sucking as well. So you might feel like baby's constantly on you, but they're not getting much. So non-nutritive sucking. So cluster feeding can be very, very normal. It does last for short periods of time. Doesn't feel short in the moment, but it might only last for, a few days to a week. And then you might feel like you hit a rhythm again. And then 3 weeks later, you're cluster feeding again. Rest assured that these are normal. These are growth spurts. Usually I do see them happen less once we've started solids. So that's helpful. Solids have their place, just like breastfeeding has its place. But I do see that sometimes it does happen less. And that might be because they're eating more calorie and nutrient dense foods. Or as we grow older, we just see less growth spurts.